You tell yourself you're a kind person. You pride yourself on being gentle, understanding, always willing to help, never causing conflict. You believe this makes you good, noble, morally superior to those aggressive, demanding people who seem to get what they want through force and intimidation. But tonight, we strip away this comfortable self-deception to reveal the uncomfortable truth. You are not kind, you are afraid to be feared. Your gentleness is not virtue but cowardice. Your accommodation not love but terror of what might happen if others stopped liking you and started respecting your boundaries instead. In the theater of human self-deception, no performance is more convincing than the person who has disguised their fear of being disliked as moral superiority over those who possess the courage to be occasionally intimidating when circumstances require it. This is not the authentic kindness that flows from strength and choice. This is the desperate people-pleasing that emerges from weakness and fear, the frantic accommodation that comes from terror of social rejection, rather than from genuine care for others' welfare. Tonight, we descend into the psychological depths, where comfortable lies about virtue collide with uncomfortable truths about motivation. We will explore how the fear of being feared creates a prison of false kindness that serves others' comfort more than authentic relationship, how the inability to inspire respectful caution makes you vulnerable to exploitation by those who understand your weakness, and why learning to be selectively intimidating is not moral corruption, but the foundation of genuine kindness that comes from choice rather than compulsion. Through the ruthless political analysis of Niccolò Machiavelli, who understood that kindness without the capacity for strategic intimidation invites exploitation from those who mistake gentleness for weakness, through the shadow psychology of Carl Jung, who revealed that the rejection of aggressive impulses creates psychological fragmentation that prevents authentic self-expression, through the power philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, who recognized that the capacity to be feared is prerequisite to the choice to be kind, through the existential insights of Jean-Paul Sartre, who showed that authentic existence requires the courage to disappoint others rather than sacrifice yourself for their approval, and through the understanding of those who have learned that respect requires the ability to withdraw benefits as well as provide them, we will uncover why your fear of being feared has made you a servant disguised as a saint. By the end of this philosophical confrontation, you will understand why truly kind people are often the most intimidating, why those who cannot inspire fear cannot provide genuine love, and why learning to be occasionally frightening is not the abandonment of kindness, but its prerequisite. The question that will determine whether you continue living as a people-pleasing prisoner or begin existing as an authentically powerful individual is this: will you continue hiding your fear of social rejection behind the mask of kindness, or will you develop the courage to be feared when fear serves authentic purposes? Niccolò Machiavelli stands as history's most penetrating analyst of the relationship between fear and effectiveness, and his insights reveal that those who cannot inspire fear when necessary cannot maintain kindness as anything more than weakness, disguised as virtue. His famous observation that it is better to be feared than loved is consistently misunderstood by those who interpret it as advocacy for cruelty rather than recognition that sustainable kindness requires the foundation of respected boundaries. Machiavelli observed that rulers who could only be loved but never feared were inevitably destroyed by those who understood that kindness without consequence is invitation for exploitation. The prince who cannot inspire fear when circumstances require it becomes a resource to be harvested rather than a person to be respected, because others learn that his kindness is compulsive rather than chosen. The political insight that Machiavelli provides is that authentic kindness emerges from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion, from the ability to withdraw benefits as well as provide them. The person who can only be kind lacks the strategic flexibility necessary for authentic relationship because they cannot adjust their approach based on others' behavior. Consider how this dynamic operates in practice. The manager who can only be nice to employees but cannot be firm when performance problems arise creates workplace environments where standards deteriorate because everyone learns that poor performance carries no consequences. The supposed kindness actually harms productive employees who must compensate for others' inadequacy. The parent who can only be gentle with children but cannot be strict when behavior problems emerge creates family environments where boundaries become meaningless because children learn that violations carry no real costs. The apparent kindness actually harms children who need clear limits to develop self-discipline and respect for others. The individual who can only be accommodating in relationships but cannot be demanding when their needs are ignored creates personal environments where they become emotional servants to others who learn that their comfort is more important than mutual respect. The surface kindness actually prevents authentic intimacy based on equality rather than servitude. Machiavelli understood that this compulsive kindness represents not moral superiority but strategic incompetence, the inability to adapt behavior to circumstances, to use different approaches with different people, to be kind to those who deserve kindness and firm with those who require firmness. The person trapped in fear-based kindness cannot distinguish between those who respond to gentleness and those who interpret gentleness as weakness to be exploited. They apply the same approach to everyone, regardless of whether that approach serves authentic relationship or enables continued dysfunction. This one-dimensional approach to human interaction creates what Machiavelli would recognize as voluntary servitude, a condition where the kind person becomes addicted to the approval they receive for their accommodation while remaining unconscious of the contempt they also receive for their predictable weakness. The Machiavellian principle reveals that developing the capacity to be feared when necessary serves not cruelty but kindness. It allows your kindness to be strategic rather than compulsive, chosen rather than imposed by fear, effective rather than exploited by those who mistake your gentleness for opportunity. This strategic approach transforms kindness from weakness into strength by making it conditional on appropriate treatment rather than automatic, regardless of others' behavior. People learn to value your kindness because they understand it could be withdrawn if they abuse it, making them more likely to reciprocate rather than simply consume. The defense against fear-based pseudo-kindness requires developing what Machiavelli would call virtue, the ability to be kind when kindness serves good purposes and firm when firmness prevents exploitation, manipulation, or the deterioration of standards that serve everyone's long-term interests. Carl Jung's exploration of the shadow reveals the psychological mechanisms through which the fear of being feared creates internal fragmentation that prevents authentic kindness by forcing the aggressive, competitive, and self-protective aspects of personality into the unconscious, where they operate autonomously and destructively rather than consciously and constructively. Jung understood that individuals who maintain conscious identities based entirely on kindness, gentleness, and accommodation have not eliminated their capacity for aggression. They have simply relegated it to the unconscious shadow, where it emerges through passive-aggressive behavior, self-sabotage, resentment, and sudden explosions that are more destructive than conscious aggression would be. The person who cannot consciously access their aggressive impulses when appropriate becomes vulnerable to others who can, because they lack the psychological tools necessary for self-protection, boundary enforcement, and the strategic intimidation that prevents exploitation by those who interpret kindness as invitation for abuse. Jung observed that this shadow rejection creates what he called psychological inflation, the unconscious belief that being kind makes you morally superior to those who can be aggressive when circumstances require it. This inflation prevents authentic self-knowledge by maintaining the illusion that you are pure while others are corrupted. The psychological insight that Jung provides is that authentic kindness requires shadow integration, the conscious recognition and acceptance of your capacity for aggression, manipulation, cruelty, and strategic intimidation, not as qualities to be celebrated, but as capabilities to be understood and deployed when they serve constructive purposes. This integration allows you to be kind from a position of strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion, from completeness rather than fragmentation. You can be gentle with those who respond to gentleness and firm with those who require firmness, without experiencing internal conflict about apparent inconsistency. The person who has integrated their aggressive shadow can access these capabilities when needed for self-protection, boundary enforcement, or the prevention of exploitation while maintaining psychological coherence rather than fragmenting into different personalities for different situations. Jung understood that this integration process requires confronting the uncomfortable truth that your fear of being feared often represents fear of your own power, fear of taking responsibility for influencing others' behavior, fear of acknowledging that you possess capabilities that could be used destructively if not guided by conscious values. The individuation process necessarily involves what Jung called the encounter with the shadow, the recognition that your capacity for kindness is meaningless unless balanced by your capacity for strategic firmness, when kindness would enable dysfunction rather than promote health. This encounter reveals that much of what you call kindness is actually psychological defense against acknowledging your own power to hurt others, your own responsibility for creating relationship dynamics, your own complicity in enabling poor treatment by refusing to enforce appropriate consequences. The Jungian path requires accepting that authentic kindness emerges from the integration of light and shadow, rather than from the denial of shadow in favor of light. The person who can be feared when necessary becomes capable of genuine kindness when kindness serves authentic purposes rather than compulsive accommodation. This integration creates what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing capabilities in creative tension, being kind and firm, gentle and strong, accommodating and demanding, according to what circumstances require, rather than what fears dictate. The psychological principle that emerges from Jungian analysis is that the fear of being feared usually represents fear of your own completeness, fear of acknowledging the full spectrum of human capabilities you possess, fear of taking responsibility for creating the relationship dynamics you actually want, rather than accepting whatever dynamics others prefer. Friedrich Nietzsche approached the fear of being feared through his analysis of master and slave morality, revealing that the inability to inspire fear when necessary represents slave morality's attempt to make weakness appear virtuous while making strength appear corrupt, making accommodation seem noble while making boundary enforcement seem cruel. Nietzsche observed that slave morality operates by inverting natural values, making those who can only be kind appear morally superior to those who can be both kind and intimidating according to circumstances. This inversion serves to protect the weak from the consequences of their inability to command respect, while making strength itself seem morally questionable. The person trapped in slave morality believes that being unable to inspire fear makes them a better person than those who possess this capability, that their compulsive kindness demonstrates superior character than others' strategic kindness, that their fear of being disliked proves greater virtue than others' willingness to be occasionally intimidating when necessary. This moral framework transforms psychological limitation into supposed spiritual advancement, making the fear of being feared appear to be moral development, rather than recognition that this fear prevents authentic relationship, genuine kindness, and effective interaction with those who require firmness rather than accommodation. Nietzsche's concept of master morality, in contrast, evaluates kindness and intimidation based on their life-enhancing versus life-diminishing effects, rather than on their conformity to moral categories that may prevent effective response to situations that require strategic flexibility rather than rigid adherence to single approaches. The master can be kind when kindness serves life, and intimidating when intimidation serves life, without experiencing guilt about apparent inconsistency or moral confusion about using different approaches with different people in different circumstances. They judge their actions by results rather than by conformity to moral rules that may prevent effectiveness. This approach requires what Nietzsche called beyond good and evil thinking, the ability to transcend conventional moral categories that make kindness always good and intimidation always bad, that make accommodation always virtuous and boundary enforcement always selfish, that make being liked always superior to being respected. The person who develops beyond good and evil understanding recognizes that kindness toward those who exploit kindness actually enables their destructive behavior while preventing them from learning appropriate social skills. That accommodation of those who require firmness actually harms them by preventing necessary growth experiences. Nietzsche's will to power manifests as the drive to develop the full spectrum of human capabilities, rather than limiting yourself to those capabilities that others find comfortable or non-threatening. This includes developing the capacity to be intimidating when intimidation serves constructive purposes, such as boundary enforcement, standard maintenance, or exploitation prevention. The person with strong will to power refuses to remain psychologically incomplete by rejecting aggressive capabilities that are essential for self-protection and authentic relationship. They understand that kindness without the ability to be firm when necessary is not virtue, but limitation that serves others' comfort more than genuine development. The Nietzschean insight reveals that the fear of being feared often represents what he called ressentiment, the psychology of those who lack the strength to command respect and therefore must rely on others' kindness while convincing themselves that their dependence on others' goodwill represents moral superiority rather than practical limitation. Breaking free from this resentment requires developing what Nietzsche called noble selfishness, the understanding that protecting your own interests through strategic intimidation when necessary serves authentic relationship better than compulsive accommodation that enables others to treat you poorly while feeling good about accepting such treatment. The practical implications of understanding that compulsive kindness represents fear of being feared extend into every area where your inability to inspire appropriate caution might make you vulnerable to exploitation, manipulation, or the gradual erosion of respect that comes when others learn that they can treat you poorly without facing meaningful consequences. In professional environments, the inability to be intimidating when necessary often manifests as accepting poor treatment from supervisors, colleagues, or clients because you fear that standing up for yourself might make you seem difficult, demanding, or unprofessional. This fear creates workplace dynamics where others learn they can violate your boundaries, ignore your needs, or take advantage of your contributions without facing resistance. The professional who develops strategic intimidation capabilities learns to enforce appropriate workplace boundaries through firm communication, strategic withdrawal of cooperation when necessary, and the willingness to escalate issues when informal resolution attempts are ignored. This approach often results in improved treatment because others learn that exploiting your kindness carries costs. In personal relationships, the fear of being feared often creates dynamics where you accept one-sided relationships that drain your resources while providing little reciprocal benefit because you're afraid that asking for more balanced treatment might lead to conflict or rejection. This accommodation enables others to remain selfish while feeling comfortable about their selfishness. The person who overcomes this fear learns to make their kindness conditional on appropriate treatment, to withdraw emotional and practical support when it's taken for granted, and to be clear about expectations while being willing to enforce consequences when expectations are consistently ignored. In family relationships, compulsive kindness often enables dysfunctional behavior by family members who learn that they can treat you poorly, ignore your needs, or make unreasonable demands without facing meaningful resistance. Your fear of family conflict prevents you from enforcing the boundaries that would actually improve family dynamics. The family member who develops appropriate intimidation capabilities can love family members while refusing to enable their dysfunction, can maintain family connections while enforcing standards of respectful treatment, can be generous while preventing their generosity from being exploited. The transformation from fear-based kindness to strength-based kindness requires developing what could be called strategic intimidation skills, the ability to communicate displeasure, enforce consequences, and escalate responses when boundaries are violated without becoming unnecessarily cruel or destructive. These skills involve learning to express anger constructively rather than suppressing it until it explodes destructively, to make demands clearly rather than hoping others will intuit your needs, to follow through on stated consequences rather than making empty threats that others learn to ignore. Building strategic intimidation capability also requires developing tolerance for others' negative emotional responses to your boundary enforcement, without automatically retreating to accommodation when they express displeasure, disappointment, or anger about your refusal to accept poor treatment. Most people who fear being feared do so because they cannot tolerate others' negative emotions and will sacrifice their own needs to avoid triggering upset, anger, or criticism. This emotional avoidance keeps them trapped in accommodating behavior that serves others' comfort more than authentic relationship. Perhaps most importantly, overcoming the fear of being feared requires recognizing that others' comfort with your weakness is not love, it's convenience. People who prefer you to remain accommodating, who resist your attempts to enforce boundaries, who become upset when you stop being automatically kind regardless of their behavior, are revealing their preference for your limitation rather than your development. The resistance you encounter when you stop being compulsively kind and start being strategically firm indicates that others have been benefiting from your weakness rather than respecting your strength. Their negative response to your boundary enforcement reveals their investment in maintaining dynamics that serve them at your expense. The ultimate recognition is that you cannot be truly kind until you are not afraid to be feared, because authentic kindness requires the freedom to choose when to be gentle and when to be firm, based on what serves genuine relationship, rather than what avoids conflict, rejection, or temporary discomfort. The person who masters this balance discovers that their kindness becomes more valuable because it's chosen rather than compulsive, more effective because it's strategic rather than automatic, and more respected because others understand it's conditional on appropriate treatment rather than guaranteed regardless of their behavior. This mastery creates relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation, interactions based on equality rather than servitude, and connections based on genuine compatibility rather than fear-based compliance with others' preferences for your limitation. The choice that determines whether you continue living as a people-pleasing prisoner or begin existing as an authentically powerful individual is ultimately about courage. Will you continue hiding behind compulsive kindness that serves your fear more than others' welfare? Or will you develop the strength to be kind when kindness serves authentic purposes and firm when firmness prevents exploitation? You are not kind, you are afraid to be feared. But you can become authentically kind the moment you develop the courage to be strategically intimidating, when intimidation serves boundary enforcement, standard maintenance, and the prevention of exploitation that enables others' destructive behavior while diminishing your authentic self-expression. Stop mistaking your fear of social rejection for moral virtue. Stop confusing your accommodation of poor treatment with spiritual development. Stop believing that your inability to enforce boundaries represents superior character rather than limitation that prevents authentic relationship. Start recognizing that genuine kindness emerges from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion, from the ability to be firm when necessary rather than from the inability to be anything but accommodating regardless of circumstances. Develop the capacity to inspire appropriate fear through boundary enforcement, consequence implementation, and the strategic withdrawal of benefits when they're consistently taken for granted. Learn to be kind to those who deserve kindness and firm with those who require firmness. Your fear of being feared has made you a servant to others' comfort rather than an authentic participant in mutual relationship. Your compulsive kindness has enabled others' selfishness while preventing your own development into someone capable of both gentleness and strength, according to what circumstances require. The truly kind person can be intimidating when necessary, because they understand that enabling others' poor behavior through endless accommodation actually harms those others by preventing them from developing appropriate social skills, respect for boundaries, and consideration for others' needs. Stop being afraid to be feared when fear serves authentic purposes. Start being authentically kind through the integration of gentleness and strength, accommodation and boundary enforcement, giving and appropriate withholding based on how others treat you, rather than on your fear of how they might respond to respectful treatment. You are not kind. You are afraid to be feared. Overcome that fear. Develop authentic kindness through the courage to be occasionally intimidating, when intimidation serves genuine relationship rather than exploitation disguised as connection. Your authentic kindness awaits your willingness to be strategically firm with those who mistake your gentleness for weakness, your accommodation for invitation to abuse, your fear of being feared for permanent permission to treat you poorly. Be kind from strength. Be firm when necessary. Be intimidating when it serves authentic purposes. Stop being afraid to be feared, and discover the genuine kindness that emerges from choice rather than compulsion, from power rather than weakness, from completeness rather than limitation. The world needs people who can be both kind and intimidating according to what circumstances require. Be one of those people. Stop fearing fear. Start choosing kindness from the foundation of strength rather than the prison of accommodation. You are not kind. You are afraid to be feared. Change that. Become authentically kind through the integration of all your capabilities, rather than the rejection of those that might occasionally make others uncomfortable. Your authentic power includes both gentleness and firmness. Use both. Be complete. Be strong. Be authentically kind rather than compulsively accommodating. The choice is yours. Continue being afraid to be feared, or start being kind from the foundation of strength that includes the courage to be intimidating, when intimidation serves authentic relationship rather than exploitation disguised as connection. Choose strength, choose completeness, choose authentic kindness that includes the capacity for strategic firmness, when firmness serves genuine purposes rather than fear-based accommodation that serves others' comfort at your expense. Stop being afraid to be feared. Start being authentically kind through the integration of all your capabilities rather than the limitation to only those capabilities that others find comfortable or non-threatening. Your authentic kindness awaits your courage to be complete rather than fragmented, strong rather than weak, strategic rather than compulsive in your approach to human relationship. Be kind, be firm, be complete. Stop being afraid to be feared when fear serves authentic purposes that benefit everyone involved, rather than just those who prefer your weakness to your strength.